Hello, and welcome to today's debate, the first Middlesex District seat in the State House of Representatives. My name is Tom Zupa. I'm Assistant Managing Editor at The Sun, and I'll be moderating today's forum. The candidates in today's race are vying for the Republican nomination for State House of Representatives in the September 14th primary. The winner in this race will face the Democratic nominee in the November 2nd general election. This district includes Ayer, Dunstable, Groton, Pepperell, and Townsend. So if you live in one of these towns, these candidates will be in your ballot on Tuesday. I'd also like to remind people viewing that there is a separate debate on lowellsun.com held this morning between the Democratic nominees. Those will also be available throughout the election season. I'd also like to remind people in Dunstable and Groton, you have a contested race for the Democratic nomination in the 1st Middlesex Senate District. The Sun will be sponsoring a debate on Thursday night, September 9th at 7 p.m. at Neshoba Valley Technical High School in Westford. You're invited to attend. Now let me introduce the candidates for the Republican nomination. First, Sheila Harrington from Groton, Connie Sullivan from Ayer.
Thanks, Tom, for having us.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving up a piece of your day. We'll start off with the format. The format is going to be, I'll ask them a question, and they'll have 90 seconds. The other candidate will have 60 seconds to respond, and then we'll go to 30-second rebuttal. At that point, I'll sort of exercise my moderator's option to open up the floor. Maybe we can go off on a particular topic, get a little bit more in depth, and we'll see how that goes. Finally, you'll each have a 2-minute closing statement. So let's get to the questions. And I'll start with you, Ms. Harrington. You're running for the Republican nomination. The Republicans have really not had much clout on Beacon Hill. If you're elected, how are you going to change that? What are you going to do to help the Republican Party grow in the state?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I have to say that over the last 10 months, I've had the opportunity to meet with people all over the district, and over I hear of people saying, I don't want the status quo. I'm actually voting in new blood. I have people that have said, I've been a lifelong Democrat and I'm changing because we need to have a more balanced legislature. I think that we will be seeing a little bit of change in that area, but I just have a story that I told last night at a meet and greet that I think summarizes how I feel a little bit about that. Long time ago, 19 years ago, I had a case where I was up against a major law firm in Boston, well-respected, 100 lawyers, and they said they wanted me to kind of go away and gave my client a nuisance offer. And he said to me, do you realize who you're up against? Do you realize this is like David and Goliath between you and our firm? And I sat there quietly and then I said, but do you remember who won? I think you can go in there, and if you have the strength of your convictions and you can articulate good legislation, good proposals, be it a very skilled negotiator, collaborator, we will be able to see that change. But I think if you go in there as a Republican, you can't think you don't have a voice and that you can't make a difference. You have to have the passion to get out there and make the difference and not be scared of the odds, even if they're not in your favor.
Mr. Sullivan.
You know, part of making the Republican Party stronger in Massachusetts is getting some new blood on Beacon Hill. People that have leadership qualities and qualified candidates, quite frankly. And you know, it hasn't been until this year that we've seen a number of races all of a sudden become contested in Massachusetts. That hasn't always been the case. And what's really driving that, Tom, is the state that we find Massachusetts in. We have a state budget that has several structural deficits. It's you know, the problems are here. We have to deal with them. We can't continue to kick that can down the road further for our children to take care of. So getting people involved that are qualified and actually want to do something on Beacon Hill to address the problems. That's what attracts the qualified candidates, and that's what the voters are looking for.
Ms. Harrington, 30 seconds if you wish.
Well, I think just as a follow-up to that, I do think it's time to get new blood. And a lot of the people with whom I'm speaking are saying they don't want any more politicians. Look what experienced politicians on Beacon Hill have done for this state. They're saying right now we need people who are there to serve, people who are there to fix the economy. And over I hear, and I believe it to be true, that the one-party legislature isn't working for anybody. Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, it isn't working for anybody. We need to have a much more balanced legislature starting January 1.
Okay. You just mentioned new word economy, so we'll go down that road a bit. Mr. Sullivan, if you were elected, considering the 8 to 9% unemployment in your district, what's your personal job stimulus plan?
It's a plan that has multiple prongs, Tom. Number one, tax relief. We know that the consumer is the driver of our economy, so putting more money into the pocketbooks of the consumer is first and foremost. And for the 1st Middlesex District, which has a number of towns that sit right on the tax-free, sales tax-free New Hampshire border, we need to be able to allow our businesses to compete on an even playing field with those businesses in New Hampshire. So lowering that sales tax is also critical to that economic recovery that we're all looking for. Streamlining business regulation and making Massachusetts a more business-friendly place to do, give it a more business-friendly environment. I've talked to a number of business owners throughout the last 13 months of my campaign, people that are involved with some larger companies as well. And they may have offices around the country and around the world. The one place that they're not hiring right now is Massachusetts. And it's because of the environment that the last 30 years of Democratic control have created here. It's not friendly for business. Lowering the cost of healthcare insurance is critical. We want businesses to be competitive. We have to cut some of those costs, those fixed costs like health insurance. We need to get rid of the state mandates that are part of our health insurance plans. That will drive down costs. We need to open up our borders to interstate competition for health insurance, instead of just allowing the 4 health insurance companies to operate in Massachusetts that we now have. We need to allow cities and towns to do plan design, to adjust their health care plans without having to subject that to collective bargaining. That's, by the way, estimated to save $1 billion over the next 10 years. We want to put money back into the pockets of the consumers. There's a way to do it to stimulate that economy, and there's ways to make businesses more competitive. And we need to act and act now.
Sarah.
I agree that we do need tax relief, and I think it's hitting people on the border towns, especially the independent liquor stores that have been hit the most hard with this new income tax, sales tax increase. And I do think we have to become more corporate friendly by lowering our corporate tax, streamlining regulations and permitting processes. But I think that's just part of the solution. I think looking at the unemployment situation for our district, you actually have to be looking at the solution as a statewide solution as a whole. In order to help the 1st Middlesex District, you have to be a team player with the state. We need to bring businesses back here. We need to not just say what we're going to stop doing, but we've got to start coming up with ideas of what we're going to start doing. And I think some of those options, I've been consulting with different people, we need to come up with creative ways and look why a very technologically rich state with a large amount of college-educated people is suffering the way they have. And I think that I do have some very, sound ideas that I think will help the state in that area.
Mr. Sullivan, 30 seconds.
You know, we've had a number of debates, and prior to today, my opponent has actually suggested regulating non-compete clauses that are used by a number of major industries here in Massachusetts to protect proprietary information and trade secrets. My opponent has suggested limiting the scope of those agreements. And in my opinion, that's a job killer for Massachusetts. It's a job killer for our high-tech companies. It's a job killer for our biopharmaceutical companies, which rely on those types of agreements, again, for fair competition and to protect research that they've been developing over the years. So yes, we need to streamline regulation, but be careful with the new ideas.
I'll let you respond.
Okay, very quickly, I think Mr. Sullivan is confusing a non-compete with a non-disclosure. I do not have any issue with non-disclosures, which do protect people's proprietary interests, but the research says otherwise with regards to the non-competes. Actually, I've been consulting with someone from the Sloan School who's done a significant amount of research in this area, and he gave me, just as a snapshot, demographically, the Silicon Valley and the greater Boston 128-495 tech belt are very similar. Because they only enforce non-disclosures and they don't enforce non-competes, the Silicon Valley has thrived. Following that train of thought, they would all be under right now. They wouldn't have prospering businesses. But in fact, over the last 10 years, in the Silicon Valley, 19 startups have have established and prospered to the point that they have hit the NASDAQ 1500. Massachusetts, Greater Boston technology area, 1. I don't agree. I think the free market, as it has been shown through this, and Michigan, again, is another state that's looked at this, the free market works itself out. Not only may your employees maybe go elsewhere, but you also can get employees from elsewhere. And that prevents a lot of companies from coming to Massachusetts because they don't want to face the lawsuit. They can't get the people. People are afraid to leave. And I think that those are important issues that we need to look at.
Sullivan, I'll give you 30 seconds now.
Yeah. Tom, I don't know if I'd use the state of California as an example of something Massachusetts should strive for. It's on the verge of bankruptcy. I think we can do better than that. And yes, I do agree that free markets operate much better than government regulation. And that's why we should let companies here in Massachusetts do what they do best, and that is conduct business with as little government interference as possible.
Okay, we'll move on here. Ms. Harrington, candidates on the campaign trail, I'm not saying specifically who want to be, but generally talk about one of their goals is to eliminate spending when they get up to the State House. But not all spending is wasteful, and not all spending, most spending goes to something, a particular constituency or a program or a paycheck. If you're elected, how are you going to determine what's wasteful and what isn't in the state budget?
Well, I think over the last, decade or so, our government has grown, and even more so recently, to the point that it really is, we're taxing people to serve the government. There are situations where we have duplicative agencies, where it doesn't need to be done that way, and we as the people, we as the taxpayers, it's not our job to keep the government in business. There are situations, for example, we have the Massachusetts Healthcare Connector that deals with people in certain situations where getting health insurance is difficult under our state mandate. Well, as of this year, we've also added a separate agency which does the same sort of thing for people on unemployment. There is no need of that duplication. We need to look at those kinds of things. We need to look at the Pacheco law. We're paying potentially too much because of our own restrictions that we are kind of controlled by union pricing. We're not offering it out to be competitive, and therefore not only are we not saving the state money, but we are giving a disadvantage to those workers that can't compete for those types of things. I think we need to look at our pension system. Most people feel that it would be a good idea to make several reforms, one of which may be to get into more of a 401k type of pension program. I don't think anybody wants state employees to be worse off than the private sector, but I think we need to be on an equal par. And I think that all of these excessive government spending programs to keep quote-unquote government in business are really on the backs of the taxpayers. And I think that there are many areas where we could make responsible cuts, and cuts have been offered.
I'll come back to you for your 30 seconds. Mr. Sullivan, 60 seconds in response.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, to give specific cuts, I think it's hard to do until you actually get into the problem. So perhaps the best approach is one on what would the approach in fact be. I know that I would start with, first of all, hiring freeze. We've had a governor who over the last 2 years has claimed that we've had this economic crisis going on, and yet he refuses to put a hiring freeze into play. That's first and foremost. Figuring out the number of state employees that we have earning, for instance, more than $75,000, and scrutinizing, do we really need that upper layer of management at those types of salaries? Looking at the leases for state office space. And we've heard of a bunch of sweetheart deals that have come to light in the paper in the past, and thanks to your paper for some of that. But examining those leases and seeing if we can do better and be more competitive. Seeing whether our state agencies have actually objectives and goals, and have they met those objectives and goals. If they haven't established objectives and goals, they should do so. We need to get some input from state employees themselves. I mean, certainly out on my campaign trail, I've run into a number of state employees, and they have a lot of suggestions on how to save money, but no one is asking them. And we tend to cut the people at the lower echelons in government, and not the people that are earning the big bucks. We need to look at both categories of employees.
Okay, Ms. Harrington, 30 seconds.
Well, I do think that, yes, when you get in there, you'll see all different areas of cuts, but I think that we also need to look at ones that have already been brought to our attention. It was over $1 billion in responsible cuts that were brought forward by the Republican caucus in the last 2 years, all summarily dismissed. I do believe the duplicative agencies are a problem, and I do believe that we're facing a $2.5 billion budget deficit looming in the distance, an unfunded pension program. We don't have the luxury of sitting around and talking of how maybe it would be a good idea to make some changes. I think you do have to do some research, and I think you do have to go in there with some real ideas and beliefs as to how things can work more effectively and the state can stay financially solvent.
Okay. Mr. Sullivan, the next question is for you. It's actually something you mentioned earlier, which is plan design for municipal employees, that is, bringing them into the state group insurance commission. You've already expressed that you think it's a good idea. Why?
I do. Well, first of all, understand that our state government is allowed to do plan design, adjusting co-pays, deductibles of its health insurance plans without having to subject those types of changes to collective bargaining. Our state legislature, however, has prevented cities and towns from doing just that. And because of that, we're hamstrung by seeing the savings and trying to reduce those health costs for cities and towns. So I say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If the state can do plan design, we should be able to allow our cities and towns to do so. And again, we're looking at estimated savings of about $1 billion over the next 10 years. That's savings that would come back to the people in the district, savings that would come back to the people in our cities and towns.
What would you say to somebody who said, well, I'm a municipal employee and why should I have to pay $1,000 more a year or $2,000 more a year for my health insurance?
Tom, I'd tell that municipal employee, first of all, go look at the private sector and compare your benefit packages. I mean, in the old days it used to be private sector employees had higher pay. It was the public sector employees that actually had the better benefits. Now what we're finding is public sector employees not only have better pay, but the better benefits as well. And you know what? There's this outrage in the private sector amongst our citizens and taxpayers. It's just not fair.
Ms. Harrington.
Well, I do believe that certain laws should be amended, such as the one that makes cities and towns held to the union 70% vote in order to join the GIC. Some of the towns in the district have already joined it, and I think that the teachers and the union people in those towns have realized that the situation that the taxpayers are in. That being said, I think that we have to look at the whole government reform as part of our cut in spending, however. I think that, pension reform is absolutely a necessity. It's a necessity. It's not a luxury. It's unfunded right now. We are not able to carry the burden that we are carrying. I also know that I, along with some other hopeful legislators to be, and some legislators that are in there now, specifically led by Karen Polito, who's running for state treasurer, are taking the option to get in there and get out of the pension system. I think that the legislators themselves have to divest themselves from any kind of conflict of interest or adding to the unfunded problem. And I think that that's an important initiative, and I have taken that pledge to opt out with those other people.
Mr. Sullivan, 30 seconds.
Tom, the pledge to opt out of the pension system, it's pure grandstanding. If you're a state employee, you don't have the ability to opt out. You're in the system. You may want to donate whatever benefits you're entitled to down the road, but you don't have the right to opt out right now. And you know what? That's a law that needs to change.
I'll let you respond.
Well, I believe that there are a lot of people that are not of that same mind, and I believe that there will be a way to opt out of the system, but I think the legislators have to take the lead on it. The new legislators have to say, I will not be part of this problem any further. I'm in here to serve. I do believe in term limits. I think that I would consider it a great honor to serve the people of my district, but I don't believe they're going to owe me my retirement. I plan to go in there, have fresh ideas, try to fix a broken system, and then let somebody else come in with some new ideas. So.
Okay. Ms. Harrington, you take the next question. You're running for state representative. Do you think this is a full-time job worth a full-time wage?
Well, I think it is a full-time job. From what I'm seeing, from legislators that I've talked to with regard to what needs to get done, I'm not sure if it's been treated like a full-time job. I myself do have a law practice in Groton, Massachusetts, and I have an incredibly effective staff. I'd have no desire to put 6 people out on the street on unemployment. I'm not going to be doing that. But I can tell you that In my opinion, it's the old saying, if you want something done, ask a busy person. It may mean that my day starts well before 7, and it may mean that my day ends well after 10. But if that's what it's going to take to keep those people employed, do what I have to keep that business going while I am working and in my commitment to the people as state representative, I will do that. I do think it needs to be looked at as to how it's structured. I think that I haven't been in the job yet, so I really need to feel that out. But possibly the year should the legislative session may have to run a little bit further out, and that may be more advantageous to the citizens. So I think that we do need to review the hours and the time, but I think that you do bring in a different perspective as a small business owner, as a taxpayer, and still being in the community in some respect, grounded in the community. You do have there is a benefit to that. But I think even campaigning, I feel like I have 2 full-time jobs right now, so.
Mr. Sullivan, you're also an attorney, and you have your own practice, correct?
I am.
Is this a full-time job?
Absolutely. And I can tell you that having been a selectman for the past 12 years, the job demands whatever time it takes. And if you're going to be effective, and if you're going to roll up your sleeves and try to resolve some of the challenges that our state is facing, you'll put in that full-time effort. So it absolutely is a full-time job.
Just throw this out as a little follow-up question. There are states that don't have full-time legislatures that seem to function fairly well. I think that's where my question's coming from. Is that a model that either of you would consider? I'll let you go first.
I would have to get in the job really to be able to answer that question. I do think that given all of the situations, economic situations in particular, that our legislature is going to be facing starting January 1st, I think it's going to be more than a full-time job. I think that time is going to be at a premium, and I think that people are going to have to be committed to working more hours than they maybe have in past years. But I definitely think that we're not in a position right now to cut back our people working towards fixing our unemployment situation and our economic issues here in the state.
Mr. Sullivan.
New Hampshire, for instance, has a part-time legislature. They also tend to be predominantly Republican. So you probably don't have to address the damage that's been done by 30 years of Democratic control. But whether it's a part-time or full-time legislature, the issue is there's a job to be done, and that job is going to require full-time efforts by all on hand. I've heard some stories over the years about the legislatures on Beacon Hill. A lot of hacks just concerned more about their pensions than doing what's right for the people of Massachusetts. I'm hopeful with the number of new people and the new blood that we've gotten attracted for these upcoming elections that will change.
Okay. Mr. Sullivan, you get this question first. Theoretically, you're facing a $2.5 billion budgetary shortfall, structural, in the next budget. If you were asked to, as a state representative, to reduce spending on something that would benefit your district, would you do it? And if so, if you wouldn't, how would you be able to ask other representatives to do the same?
A little bit hard to answer the question in the abstract, but I can tell you that with the types of budgetary problems our state is facing, everybody is going to have to share in the pain. There's not going to be able to be any sacred cows, so to speak, Tom. So I think the people of Massachusetts are smart. They understand that you may want something, but you may not just be able to afford it. And the message that has been resonating throughout my 13 months of campaigning for state rep is people want a smaller, leaner, more sustainable state government. And that requires cuts. And that's going to require that everybody share in those cuts.
Ms. Harrington.
Well, I actually have more of a feeling that what's good for the state will be good for our district. If it's something that brings more jobs in, if it's some sort of a policy, again, it's hard to say in the abstract. But I do think that what we do need to do is we need to be very apprehensive of those policies that tend to have a scare tactic in them, that the local cities and towns are going to be the one that are going to lose out. I don't know that we have to have a budget that's designed that at the end of the day we cut it from the local aid, and that's what I feel like continues to happen cycle after cycle. I do believe that there was also a proposal by the Republican caucus to bring forward a 2-year legislative session, possibly have a 2-year budget. Give towns the ability to plan more than they're able to plan now, and not have it be a situation where the only way to make those final cuts, to make things happen, are to take it from the local cities and towns. I am opposed to that kind of a tactic, a tax and cut tactic.
Okay. Mr. Sullivan, 30 seconds.
Now, Tom, first of all, recognizing that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem, as we do so at the local level, is first and foremost. And we need to be smart with the cuts that we make. I can tell you that and I said there were no sacred cows, but if there was to be a sacred cow, and there is in my opinion, it's local aid. We have seen our local cities and towns build their budgets on local aid from our state, and every year that has been cut again and again and again. And at some point that has to stop. And you need legislators on Beacon Hill that are going to have the guts to look elsewhere for the cuts that need to be made, and willing to make deep cuts elsewhere, but not in local aid.
Okay. As long as we're on the finances of the state, sorry, Ms. Harrington, you have this next question. Many people in leadership positions have said that we should severely limit spending and borrowing through the next couple of years till the state and the country get out of the recession. Mm-hmm. Once the economy recovers, what should the state's financial strategy be?
I think their financial strategy should be to go back to where we were several years ago, where we built up a rainy day fund. I think that there's no reason, it's been done before, and I think it can be done again, but I think that was under Republican leadership, so there wasn't the spending mentality that we have seen over the last several years. We are in a very dangerous position. The state right now is borrowing in order to cover even their state employees' salaries at this point. Liken that to being a small business owner, I know that my responsibility each week is to make sure that I have that payroll, that I have earned that payroll, that I am able to provide the state taxes that I'm related to with that payroll. I think the government should be run the same way. I think you have to look at what do you have to use. I need to put a cushion away for a rainy day, but I can't borrow every week or every month in order to keep up my operating expenses. That's just not a sound business policy, not a sound economic policy, and a very unsound and unsteady policy for the Commonwealth. So as I said, I suggest we go back to where we were as far as the leadership that changed its mentality from the governor on down. I think we all have to take on a different view. We need to run the state more like we run our businesses, with a realistic goal of meeting our expenses without borrowing just to operate.
Mr. Sullivan.
Tom, our state is currently overextended on the amount of debt that it's carrying. And as an example, our state transportation system carries the largest debt service of any public transportation system in the country, $8.5 billion. That's just wrong. And you know what? When you're carrying that kind of a debt service, you end up deferring critical maintenance and repairs. We have a governor and a lieutenant governor right now that are proposing, for instance, buying some additional track space in South Station, so that additional cars, train cars, can load and unload passengers at a tune of $100 million. This again is with an $8.5 billion debt service. Just wrong. And you know what? They need to develop a policy on what is an acceptable debt service for our state as a whole and for our state agencies. And you need to open up the discussion so the public becomes part of that. And you do that by making Beacon Hill more transparent. You know, our state legislature, again, has required that all of our cities and towns be subject to the open meeting law. And ironically, it's the state legislature that's not subject to the open meeting law. And as a result of that, there's a lack of accountability, and you don't have the public bringing those valuable ideas to the table. So open up the process, set the policy for what our debt should be for our state and state agencies, and let's stop overextending ourselves.
Okay, Ms. Harrington, 30 seconds.
Well, again, I think I reiterated exactly what I said. We can't be overextended. We're not going to survive on that type of a mentality. We need to tighten the belts and prepare for the difficult times more, as we have done in past administrations.
I want to just hop on something that you said, Mr. Sullivan. One of our candidates in the Democratic debate this morning mentioned the Division of Open Government as a governmental waste program. You clearly disagree. Talk a little bit, how important is this? How important is transparency? And Ms. Harrington, you'll get a chance at this as well.
Well, when you don't have transparency, Tom, you have all these backroom deals that go on. And as we've seen, we've had how many speakers of the House now indicted and convicted of crimes? By opening up the process so that the press is part of that, the people are part of that. Again, you make our state representatives, our state legislators more accountable to the people. And again, the people bring value to the table. I don't know all of the answers to all of the issues out there. And certainly you need to be listening to the people and formulating the ideas and taking a leadership position. But the people have valuable input. And you know what? They're kept from providing that input by the system that now exists on Beacon Hill.
Ms. Harrington.
I 100% agree in the fact that the open meeting laws have to extend to the legislature. I think that the only people really that have to worry about that or oppose that are people that don't want the people to know what they're doing. And I think those are people that are forgetting that who they serve. I think that as an attorney in my profession, I've always had to be so mindful that it's the people that I am working for, that I serve, that I'm committed to them to do what I need to do for them. It's not the other way around. So that it takes a lot of hubris, I think, for legislators to say we shouldn't be subject to that law, because we're then saying to those of you who we serve, we don't really want you to know what we're doing, and I think that's wrong.
Okay. Next question is for you, Mr. Sullivan. One of the biggest issues in the legislature in the past year, probably the last 2 months of legislative session, is casino gambling. How do you feel about casino gambling? And if you're in favor of it, what will you do to sort of jumpstart the process come January?
Tom, as a local official, I come from the perspective that you give the people as much power as you can. I think that the whole manner in which casino gambling was handled in our state was a fiasco. And again, it was because of the lack of transparency that we had a closed deal orchestrated by Mr. DeLeo, the Speaker of the House, and somehow they agreed that there would be 3 casinos, resort casinos statewide, and slots at a couple tracks. The public had no input on that. I'm not even sure all the legislators had input to that backroom deal that went on. So if I had the option, and hopefully I will come November, I would have opened that process up by putting, first of all, the gambling on a referendum ballot and letting the people throughout Massachusetts decide, do you want gambling or don't you? And if they wanted gambling, then I would allow cities and towns to then decide if they're going to have gambling in their cities and towns. The state may have some kind of broad regulation of gambling that's put into place, but let the cities and towns determine whether they want it. Not only would they benefit from any revenue that's raised from gambling, but they would also incur any of the ills that we hear spoken about with respect to gambling. For our governor to say that, well, the market can only justify 3 resort casinos statewide, I think he's wrong. I mean, how many supermarkets can we sustain statewide? Let the free marketplace determine that, and let it do it through our cities and towns.
Ms. Harrington, 1 minute.
Okay, I think with regard to the whole issue of the debate, casinos, the casino debate, and how it was handled on Beacon Hill this year, I think it was a prime example of Beacon Hill's ineffectiveness and misplaced priorities. I think that while they were back and forth, like in some cases like children with their toys, if I don't get 5, I don't want any. I think we had to look at bigger issues that were also on the table. And while so much time was spent on that, the unemployment situation never really was addressed. We have a budget issue that should have been a major issue and an unemployment issue that should have been a major issue. I believe that, like anything that you're venturing into as a new venture, let's see if it works. Why do we have to have 5 or nothing? Why don't we try by doing it in a more strategic way of phasing them in? See how they're working. Maybe some of the people who have such a fear of it changing the character of their communities by adding a gambling casino to their area, let them see if it does or if it does not. But I don't know that we should have been fighting about 3 of these, 2 of those, if all 5 or nothing at all, while everything else sat on the table. I think that for the legislators coming in this January, we are going to have one of the most difficult tasks ahead of us because too much was left undone just because of one issue, which was the casino debate.
Hold you up there. Mr. Sullivan, 30 seconds to rebut.
Again, decentralize the power. Don't let Beacon Hill, grab that ball and try to control it. Let our cities and towns make the decisions. They're in a better position to do so, and let the free marketplace govern how many casinos, whether it's slots or resorts that we have throughout the state.
Okay, we're going to talk about the 3 ballot questions now that are coming up in November, and these are things you may have to be dealing with if you're elected come January. I want to go to question 3 first, which is the tax rollback question, talking about rolling back the state sales tax to 3%, which people have talked about it being a several billion-dollar dent, unexpected in the state budget. Ms. Harrington, my question is, if voters approve this in November, do you support it? And if you don't support it, but the voters in your district do, will you vote in favor of it?
Again, I think I've been very clear that I serve them, and so it's their needs and their concerns which will be most important to me when I go to Beacon Hill. So with regard to the rollback, ideally, I would love to see it go back to 3%. Realistically, we have a budget deficit now that first needs to be dealt with before we have the luxury of lopping off that much state sales tax. I do think that in certain areas with particular, and it's probably coming up very quickly, the liquor store issues, the liquor tax, it has more of a significance even than for other areas. I have asked this question over and over, and I think we're sort of in a very unique area in the state where we're more of a community that doesn't have the big stores and the big malls and stuff like that. Our main shopping area, the closest shopping area to my house is actually Nashua, New Hampshire. Over and over the last year, I've said to people, how many of you shopped in Nashua when the sales tax was 5%? Can I see a show of hands? There wasn't a hand down. I don't know that the 6.5 to the 5, although I don't believe it was right to go up over the 5. I think it should be repealed, but I think it's myopic to think that that's going to have such a huge effect on our economy, especially in the districts that we will, that we're in, that I hope to represent. I think that before we can lop off our entire sales tax, we need to make the cuts in our spending so that we can get it back to a reasonable sales tax.
Mr. Sullivan.
Tom, we just recently had a weekend where the sales tax was eliminated in Massachusetts. And the reports that I saw was that 2 days without a sales tax generated about $500 million worth of business in Massachusetts. That's pretty substantial. And if you're going to increase business, allow business to grow, business hires people when they expand the volume of business, and the new employees will be paying an income tax. So in my opinion, what we lose in that sales tax will certainly be made up in income tax. And the Beacon Hill Institute, by the way, has done a study. If we were to reduce that sales tax to 3%, it would actually generate about 32,000 private sector jobs. It would require cuts at the state level. About 16,000 jobs at the state level would have to be cut. But that's a 2-to-1 ratio. That's something that I certainly would want to bet on. And unless you force the hand of our state government to become smaller by reducing the revenue that's available, it'll never happen. So that the people are angry. And let me tell you, I am absolutely sure that we're going to see that referendum pass where that sales tax gets voted back down to 3%. And if it does, I certainly will work to make sure it stays at 3%.
Well, just based on simple math, when we went down to a 0 sales tax, we were very competitive with New Hampshire because they have a 0% sales tax. So 0 will equal 0. 0 will always be 3%, and it will always be 5%. So unless we are going to eliminate the sales tax, the 0 sales tax will always be a better bet for people. And I, as I said, I would have no greater desire than to see it come down to 3. But you do have to make the cuts first in order to be able to do that. We are already borrowing. We're already overextended. If we take that down and haven't done the work in the legislature to make the cuts, where does that put us for?
But if it's a constitutional convention, you have to vote. How do you vote? I'm not speaking for Mr. Sullivan. I think I'm hearing he would vote in favor of the 3%.
I believe at this point I would have to say I'd vote for the 5% because I think it has to be implemented in strategically and over time.
Tom, I'd actually propose an enterprise zone across northern Massachusetts. and making that enterprise zone have a 0% sales tax. So we can in fact compete toe-to-toe with businesses in New Hampshire. You know, if you look at New Hampshire versus, Southern New Hampshire versus Massachusetts over the past year, unemployment almost close to 10% here in Massachusetts. In Southern New Hampshire, it's 4%. Sales last holiday season in Massachusetts were flat compared to a year ago. In Southern New Hampshire, they had a 7% increase over the prior year. So that sales tax makes a big difference. And you know what? We've done an enterprise zone in Devens, right next to the first Middlesex district. Why can't we do it for Northern Massachusetts?
To respond?
Well, I believe that the enterprise zone obviously makes a lot of sense, and if that is proposed before the legislature, that certainly would help the first Middlesex district along with the many other towns that may be border towns. But again, in order for New Hampshire to be able to offer that, New Hampshire probably has made the necessary budgeting arrangements to survive without that amount of tax, whether it be through their higher property taxes or tolls or methods that they are gaining their revenue. You can't completely shut it down and then borrow the money to keep going. You need to get our costs down so that we can have that ability to have lower sales taxes. It's just not looking at the numbers. It's irresponsible. You can't take that down and then say, let's just borrow our way out of it, because that's what you would have to do if you haven't taken the necessary steps to bring down the size of government first.
Tom?
I'll give you the final word on this one, and we'll move on to the next question.
You know, if you hear the resistance, it's because what you're hearing is that it's a revenue problem and not a spending problem. And I believe what we have in Massachusetts is a spending problem, and we need to stop the spending.
I just have to say, I don't think you really did hear me, because what I did say is it was a spending problem. We need to cut the spending down, and then we can take care of it.
Okay, we'll move on to the other two questions. Question one on the ballot is tied in very specifically to repeal the sales tax on alcohol. First District does not have a lot of alcohol sales venues, but a few. How do you feel about that, Mr. Sullivan?
Absolutely in favor of it. I've spoken to a number of owners of package stores throughout the first Middlesex District. Do you know that those owners can now go to New Hampshire, pay retail price for alcohol cheaper than they can purchase it at wholesale in Massachusetts? That is absolutely wrong, wrong, wrong. I mean, these package stores are part of the mom and pop stores on our main streets, and they're struggling. Some have gone out of business already. Let's again make Massachusetts a business-friendly place, and not just tax our businesses out of business.
Harrington, 1 minute.
Well, I absolutely agree with the repeal of the alcoholic beverage tax. I hope I'm not still in the same question.
Yeah, no, we're
okay. The way you look down. Anyway, but I do think we need to look at that when we have increased that and caused our independent liquor stores to be subject to the 6.25% sales tax. Not only did we not make them competitive, not only did we cost what I believe to be close to 15,000 jobs here in the Commonwealth, but what we did is rather than that money even going into the general fund, that money was specifically allocated for a substance abuse prevention program. I don't know right now whether we have the luxury as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to take what could be up to $111 million in revenue and not apply it to the debts and the costs that we are facing as a state just for the benefit of a certain area and a certain program. I actually too, and I would have to do some research on this, I don't know if actually that is what occurred and that they did actually get the money into those programs. I'd be interested to see how much of it was effectively used. But I think you have put our independent liquor stores in a position where they have to let people go, and they absolutely can't be competitive because it's cheaper to buy retail in New Hampshire than wholesale in Massachusetts at this point.
Mr. Sullivan, 30 seconds.
You know, the package stores, again, they're part of our mom and pop stores on Main Street in Massachusetts. And, you know, they provide jobs for our kids. They provide second jobs for some of us to supplement our income. Let's bring the jobs back to Massachusetts, and let's cut that sales tax.
One question we haven't talked about is question 2, which is repealing Chapter 40B, which is the Affordable Housing Law. Ms. Harrington, how do you feel about that, and what would the impact be in the First District?
I believe that the repeal of the 40B is a sound decision. I think based on what I've been able to gather and talking to people more intimately involved with the 40B situation, it has actually become a mechanism for builders and contractors to circumvent the requirements or the restrictions of the various towns and putting housing there. People will, I've heard it said that, you know, it will help it helps the homeless. And being a person who's done conveyancing, real estate conveyancing for several years, I can tell you that that's not the demographic that we're reaching with the 40B housing, because at the end of the day, those people most vulnerable of not having a place to live are not going to qualify for those mortgages even within the 40B setting. So there really isn't benefiting the people that we think we are benefiting in many areas, but what it is doing is it's allowing builders to get in there and to skate through the process and not observe the same rules that everyone else has to that builds within the towns in our district as well as the state.
Mr. Sullivan.
Tom, being a selectman in the town of Air, certainly have had a great deal of experience with 40B. I can say that I am categorically against 40B. And I hope that the law is repealed. It's one of those unfunded mandates, again, from our state legislature that we struggle with on a daily basis in our cities and towns. I mean, we're told that we need to reach 10% of our housing stock as being affordable units, otherwise you're not eligible for various state grants. The density that comes with 40B projects overwhelms our municipal resources. It adds a slew of new kids to our schools, and who pays for the new addition that's now necessary to the school to accommodate those kids, or the new teachers that are now necessary to teach those kids? It's not the developer. Pepperell this year, struggling with the drought that we've been having on just maintaining enough water from its aquifers to provide for the basic needs of its citizens. It's already banned outside water use. 40B would further deplete water as a resource. It's just wrong. You know, we have a bunch of legislators on Beacon Hill, some of which have never held a job in the private sector. They come up with these cockamamie ideas, and they force these mandates upon local cities and towns, being the do-gooders that they think they're being. You know, they call affordable housing that is built in the town of Air, it's priced at $298,000. Who in their right mind, who is homeless or in need of a home, a modest cost home, can afford a mortgage of $298,000? You know, it just doesn't work. It's a lame program, and it needs to go.
Ms. Harrington.
I'm actually going to make this easy on you.
Yeah.
I don't have any further comment. I
Okay.
think we both have stated that we disagree with the 40B.
Okay, well, let me just ask a follow-up question. What's the responsibility of the community to provide housing? I'll start with you, Mr. Sullivan. Is there a...
We've done a number of things locally, Tom. We've you know, given developers concessions on zoning bylaws. In other words, they can make lots smaller if they wish, if they'll give us some affordable units. We've had Habitat for Humanity build a couple homes in our town, and the community chips in, providing their labor and their financial resources to build those types of homes. We have housing for our seniors. You know, we just converted the Pleasant Street School in Air into, I think it was 22 units of affordable housing for our seniors. I mean, that's the group that you got to protect, is the seniors in our town. The ones that are on the fixed income, they're the ones that need the affordable housing. And you know, we work very hard at not only maintaining the housing that we have for our seniors, but expanding it.
Well, I think it's important to note that how much are you asking legislators to make those regulations with regard to how towns will help to make affordable housing? And I think that's the main issue that we discuss with 40B. I obviously feel like me as an individual and everyone as an individual has a responsibility, if they are capable, to help others in situations where they are going to potentially be homeless, okay? I don't think it's something we legislate. I think it's something that works, like you said, in organizations like Habitat for Humanity. Myself, I sat on the board of the Lowell Wish Project for a couple of years. I know very well the homelessness and the difficulties families are facing all over this area. But fortunately, this is something where the private sector, and I don't even want to use the word private sector, individual citizens feel the necessity to serve and assist others. I think that we as a people, we as a Commonwealth, have to stress those individual opportunities to help in this process. And Habitat for Humanity is obviously one of the best programs in that area. I do agree that senior housing and letting people stay in the communities that they lived in all their life is a great need and an obligation of the younger residents, so to speak. But I do think that this is something that's more for the private sector than it is for the public sector.
Tom, just briefly, the market also provides affordable housing. If you want an affordable house, now is the time to buy right away.
Unfortunately, foreclosures provide that
Right.
opportunity.
Okay. We'll have one more question, we'll go to closing statements. I think, and for this one, I want to give you 2 minutes each. I just basically like you both to say, what is the biggest difference between you and your opponent? Mr. Sullivan?
The biggest difference is experience at the local level. As I said, I completed 12 years of service as a selectman. During that 12 years, I was able to help balance 12 consecutive budgets without a Proposition 2.5 override. Certainly was able to understand firsthand the implications of local aid being cut and how that affects our ability to provide quality education for our kids and public safety for our citizens through police and fire services. My opponent doesn't have that experience, and if you think that local experience is important, then I'm your candidate. I've shown a commitment by working, living, raising my family in this district over the last 24 years. And part of that commitment begins in your own community. Attending town meeting, voting. I've been a religious attendee and voter at town meeting and at the polls. My opponent hasn't been. If you think that's important, then I'm your candidate. If you're looking for a candidate who's ready to serve as your next state representative on day one, then I'm your candidate.
Sharon, I'll give you 2 minutes.
I think one of the major differences between Mr. Sullivan and me is that he is an experienced politician. I am not. I too have tried to serve the people of my community, but unlike Mr. Sullivan, who says I balanced the budget, when in fact I think it became very evident through a letter of one of his co-selectmen that no, it's not a single person. There's no I in team. FinCom was involved, Assessor's Office was involved, everybody is involved in that process. I don't take credit for things that the whole team does, but I am a team player, I can tell you that. I have served. I don't serve just so that I can have a placard and a microphone. That doesn't give me my opportunity to serve. My opportunity to serve has been to work with people, not just in my immediate town, but in the community at large. I think that there is a big difference. I made a joke, I think, at one point that unlike a one-horse town, I'm not a one-town horse. I serve because it's what I choose to do. I don't serve for the recognition, but I serve because I see needs and I feel that I have the skills to make those problems, if not disappear, less than they were when I started. But I feel like I do it as always part of a collaborative effort, as part of a team. I think all of the legislators next year have to be team players. And there's no I in team. You really have to be part of the group.
So I'm going to give you a chance to respond just quickly.
Yeah, to call a former selectman a career politician when we dedicate and volunteer our time and public service as a selectman, I think you'd find every one of the selectmen in our district disagreeing with that statement. The only career politician involved in this race has been the one that has endorsed my opponent, right? And I did say that I helped balance 12 consecutive budgets. And of course you do it with a team. And you know what? When you have a team of people that you're working with at the town level, you provide leadership. And I did in fact provide leadership for that team. And when we faced economic problems in the town of Air, it wasn't a revenue problem that we looked at first. It was the spending problem that I directed that team to address. And we did so successfully 12 years in a row without that Proposition 2.5 override. As a matter of fact, this past town meeting, we were able to secure and transfer $88,000 from our budget into stabilization. This time is when most of the towns in the district, and I was attending those town meetings, were taking money out of their stabilization budgets to balance the operating budgets for the town. Our town of Air, we very aggressively supported, and I in particular led the pack on this, tax breaks for local businesses, and helping those businesses create jobs. As a result, the town of Air was noted as one of the top 10 cities cities and towns in Massachusetts, best poised for economic growth this year. This is economic growth that I hear all the towns trying to to achieve in order to offset the losses in local state aid from the state. So yes, I didn't do it by myself. I had a great team to work with, but I provided leadership for that team.
I want to give you 30 seconds. I want to leave time for closing statements.
Okay, I'll be very quick. First of all, I was endorsed very early on by Bob Hargreaves. I appreciate his support. I didn't ask him to endorse me, and I think that's significant. And in recent weeks, I have had people in political office ask if I would like their endorsement. And quite frankly, I have said no, because it's not the politicians that I want to be endorsing me. It's the people that I want to endorse me. I'm there to serve the people, not the other politicians. Mr. Sullivan has an entire page, I believe, from what I understand, on his website, of politicians that have endorsed him. I am not seeking their approval. I am not seeking their endorsement. I am in this to serve the people, and that's the only endorsement that I want.
Okay, and we're going to have a little press for time. I want to go to closing statements. Mr. Sullivan, look in the camera. You have 2 minutes to say why you should be the next state representative.
Yeah, Tom, and I will take a moment to address that last statement from my opponent. The politicians, quote unquote, that my opponent says have endorsed me are the selectmen in each of your towns. We've got Patrick McNabb from Pepperell. We've got former selectman Wes Goss from Dunstable. We have the 2 most recently re-elected selectmen in Groton, Josh Deegan and Stu Schulman. We have Vice Chair of the Air Board of Selectmen, Jim Fay. We have Nick Tallheimer from Townsend, selectman there. Former police chief, Al Davis. The veterans agent, Joe Mazzola from Townsend. We got the VFW commander from Townsend, Keith Jackson. Those are, quote unquote, the politicians that my opponent's referring to that support me. They know the work that I've done as a selectman. They know that I'm there for the people. They know that I put in whatever hours it takes to address the problems that have confronted our town and our district. And you know what? I'm just chomping at the bit to address the problems that our state is facing at this point. You know, as a selectman, it's just been frustrating when we've held the line on taxes locally to watch our state legislature over the last 2 years raise taxes 8 different times, increase the number of state employees by 10%, and increase overall state spending by over $4 billion. This is just wrong for Massachusetts. I know we deserve to do better. I know I can do better, and I ask you for your vote on September 14th.
Ms. Harrington, you get the final word. 2 minutes, please.
Well, ironically, after saying that he was not endorsed by politicians, he was certainly able to reel off a significant number of people holding political office that are endorsing him. I can tell you right now that I'm not part of that old boy network, and I'm not part of that political scene. I'm the first one to say I am not an experienced politician. But what I am is somebody who's looking to get in there and help fix a broken economy in a broken state. And I think that the answer isn't simple. The answer is going to be multifaceted. I think obviously reducing, corporate tax, corporate regulation, changing the permitting process, those are all important. I know that rolling back the sales tax at least to 5% is extremely important. But I also think that we do really have to come up with creative ideas. And rather than just looking at what we can't be doing, we need to be much more proactive. Our Economic Development Council has to be looking toward the future, looking toward bringing new businesses in, whether that's marketing ourselves and making some strategic decisions. There are 2 bills before the legislators that have been sent back to session that deal exactly with that issue of the non-competes. Rather than throwing mud at the ideas of possible ways to improve things, I think we have to have no hubris, have no arrogance, and say, we will need help. We will need to look at every creative idea, and I will be searching out those people that may be able to help give the answers. But I am first and foremost a person who will want to serve the people of my community. I intend to serve them. I intend to represent them zealously, to advocate for them, but I also intend to collaborate because I feel that we're looking at statewide issues that are impacting our particular district and that we need to work as team players. I feel that my record of being on various boards and committees and then even just being at the trenches, handing out water bottles in the rain, whatever the service is that I need to do, I will do it. It's not because I'll have a placard, not because I'll have a microphone.
And with that, we will conclude our debate. Once again, our candidates are Sheila Harrington from Groton, Connie Sullivan from Ayer. They're running in the 1st Middlesex District House of Representatives, that is Ayer, Dunstable, Groton, Pepperell, and Townsend. They're seeking the Republican nomination for state representative in the September 14th primary, and the winner in this race will face the winner of the Democratic primary on the same day. They'll face off in the November 2nd general election. Thank the candidates for coming today. Appreciate your time and your thoughts and your energy, and good luck to both of you. Once again, I want to remind people that both this debate and the Democratic debate that was held this morning will be available on lowellsun.com/election. I also like to remind everyone that if you live in Groton and Dunstable, you're also facing a contested race in the state Senate. There'll be a debate Thursday, September 9th, 7 p.m. at Neshoba Valley Technical High School between the two Democratic candidates, Chris Doherty and Eileen Donahue. Finally, I'd like to remind everyone that Election Day is September 14th. And if you live in one of the towns in this district, you have two contested races, one on the Democratic side, one on the Republican side, so you should definitely get out and vote. Polls are open until 8 again. Thank you very much again.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tom. Thanks to the Sun as well.